Whereas I totally agree with the 85% rule, it can be a bit troublesome when a customer really wants to stick to it religiously. Now, the problem I have when a customer really wants to stick to the 85% guideline is that it can rule out a lot of different caravans that would be much better layouts than the kind of vans that you can get within that limitation. So 1378, you're looking at 2 berths, some 4 berths, a few fixed beds, but not very many, and they will be a smaller caravan. If you could get that limit up to 1500, that would bring in lots of different island beds, lots of different variations on those themes as well. So that's when I kind of struggle with the 85% rule, because that Mondeo that we looked at could legally tow 2 ton. Now, to be able to only go to 1378, you're miles away from the legal limit and the safe limit on that Ford Mondeo. Like I said in the very first video, if you can get to around about that 500 gap between the total permissible brake trailer weight and the MTPLM of the caravan, then that's kind of an ideal situation to be in. But there is a kind of a way around the 85% guidelines, but also you're able to stay within the 85% guideline. And it sounds strange, but this is how I look at it. So the problem with the 85% rule is it's saying that you're towing with a tow vehicle that's completely empty and a caravan that's completely full. Now, you just don't tow very often in that situation. So if you think about it logically, you're probably going to have someone else with you in the car, you're probably going to have a couple of dogs, you're probably going to have a few bits and bobs in the car. You could even put the awning in the car. So what does that do to the curb weight of the car? Well, obviously it puts it up. So if you imagine you're putting a couple of 100 kilograms in your towing vehicle, you can then add 200 kilograms to the MTPLM of your caravan, and you'll still be within that 85% guideline. So just think, you've got a person, you've got a few extra bits and bobs, and you can maybe put the awning in the back. So the real way to find out actually what you are towing is to load your caravan up with what you're going to take on holiday, load your car up as you would do normally, and go to a weigh bridge. Weigh the car, weigh the caravan. With those figures, you can have a look and see kind of whereabouts you are with it. And you'll be surprised, it's more often than not, if you're using that 500 kilogram rule that I said at the beginning, then you're probably going to be well within the 85% rule anyway. And then what it does is it brings in those layouts that you maybe wouldn't be able to have a look in if you stuck to it religiously. So your island beds with an end washroom, around about the 1500 kilogram mark. Some of the bigger 4 berths that would have a side dinette with a front lounge, they're going to be around about the 1500 kilogram mark. But if you stick to that 1378, you'd probably be ruling a lot of those out. So that's a bit of a hack for the 85% rule. Put a bit of weight in your car, and then you can creep your MTPLM of the caravan up to suit. And then even when you are towing with not much in the car, if say you're taking it for a service and you've got lots of stuff in the caravan, then if you have a look at it, you're still within that 100% rule, and you're still well within what the what the total permissible brake trailer weight of the car is. So that's a bit of a hack around the 85% rule. But you've also got best practice as well. So all these things don't really matter if you don't load the caravan correctly. So make sure anything heavy is over the axle. Make sure you don't put everything at the back or at the front so that the nose is really heavy or really light, because that's going to affect the way that the car pulls a caravan. If the caravan's really heavy on the back, then it's going to lift up the car and it will start to snake under heavy braking. Same with the front. If you load the front up, it will load the back of the car up, and then you'll get the same situation. So make sure the caravan's nice and level when you're towing. Make sure that all the heavy stuff's over the axle, and then make sure that your chassis is well maintained. So your tyres are all up to date and at the right pressure. And also make sure that your braking system is well maintained. Also, don't exceed the speed limit and slow down if the weather conditions get a bit dodgy. Just a side note, there are some situations where the 85% rule actually exceeds the total permissible brake trailer weight of the car. It doesn't that very often, but there are a few cars out there that fall within those brackets. So just double check everything. Make sure you know that what your total permissible brake trailer weight is. If you want to stick to the 85% rule, then and have a look at those figures and see where you can be. Obviously, you can tweak that a little bit by putting some in the car. If you're more experienced, then you can go to the 100%, which isn't a problem. And actually, talking about it, I think the experienced versus inexperienced thing can be a bit troublesome as well. Actually, I think that you're safer when you're inexperienced, because you're very focused on the caravan behind you. Everything's new, it feels strange. You're constantly looking in the back mirror, you're aware of where it is, you're checking your speed limit. The problem is when you get complacent, when you're 3 or 4 years down the line, you're towing along and you've forgotten it's there because you're so used to the feel of it. And that's when you pull into the service station and take out a petrol pump. So that's when you've got to start thinking about it, is when you're getting to that complacent kind of area. So 3 or 4 years down the road, when technically you're going into an experienced tower, just keep an eye out for things. I think when you're a novice, it's really obvious the caravan's there and you're thinking about it all the time. So that's the videos on towing. Hopefully that's given you enough information to make sure that your car is legal, make sure that you're towing safely, and it can give you a bit of an idea of what you can now start to go out and look at layout wise and weight wise when you know what your car is going to be. So hopefully this has cleared a few things up for you. If it hasn't, have another look at the videos, or don't forget you can send me a message on Facebook or post it, because if you're thinking about a question, probably the chances are someone else is thinking about the same thing. So now you'll know what your car can legally tow, what it can safely tow, and you can start to look at the kind of tow weights that you can tow safely. Hello, sorry, I forgot to mention this, I'm getting good at that. Why are we worried about all these things in the first place? Now, sometimes I take it for granted that everyone knows everything, but obviously this isn't why you're looking at this course, you're new to it. Right, so what happens when you overload your caravan or when you have defective brakes and you're going down the motorway and you brake suddenly? What happens is the caravan can go into what is called a snaking situation. So the car will brake and then the caravan will brake, and because of the way the brakes are, it may well dip to one side if the caravan's unloaded correctly or the brakes are faulty, and then you get the caravan starting to sway. And then if you then brake or something else happens, it goes past that point of no return and then it will turn over. That's what snaking is. Now, I've been in this situation where I've had a caravan snaking behind me and it's pretty scary. You kind of don't know what to do. Do I accelerate? Do I brake? Best thing to do is just hold on and then hopefully it will sort itself out. If you look at my ATC video much further down the line, you'll see there's some pieces of kit that will stop this from happening. But it's not a nice situation to be in. Now, what we also say is you don't want the tail wagging the dog. So you don't want the caravan to be heavier than the car, well, certainly not heavier than the car. That's definitely what you don't want. But you want to be able to gap this away so that the caravan, if you did get into a situation where it's starting to sway from side to side, the car can sit there nice and heavy and not worry about it too much. Now, I tow with a Range Rover and most of the caravans I'm towing are pretty empty, so I don't really get into that situation very often. But as you get closer to the total permissible brake trailer weight matching what the MTPLM of the caravan is, then that's where you can get the situation where the caravan is going to start pushing the car around. That's where you don't want to be. That's why we say gap those two figures away from each other as far as possible, so that if you do get into that situation, the caravan will kind of move around a bit, but the car will stay steady and it won't move. But obviously as you get closer to that, that's when the car can start to get pushed around a little bit. So that's why we're talking about best practices, loading the caravan correctly, having your tyres serviced and maintained along with your braking system, keeping to the speed limit, slowing down when the weather gets bad and things like that. So that's why we're doing all this kind of thing. So I apologise for that. I just took it for granted that that's what we're talking about, but now you know.